Hello everybody, it's Jeff from Close to Home in Glastonbury here with the second step of the mystery quilt, sashed squares. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to make some half square triangles. Now we did do an alternate cutting, so there are going to be a couple of different directions. If you cut to the 3 7/8 side, just realize you're going to be sewing triangles with a 1/4 inch seam, and if you cut them to the 4-inch side, you're going to be making 2 at a time triangles that you will then trim down to 3 1/2 inch finished half square triangle blocks. So let's move on to the half square triangles. Whether you're using the 4-inch or the 3 7/8 inch squares, it's going to start out the same way. You're going to take a set of strips, one dark and one light, and you're going to put those right sides together. If you are cutting the 3 7/8 inch squares, then you will cut that size, or if you sized it up in my alternate cutting, you are going to cut a 4-inch size. Now, a good way to keep those long strips together is you can actually iron them right sides together, and that will help them stick when you cut out your individual squares. A little note about pairing as well. It's a good idea to mix and match your light and dark strips. However, you can do it a few ways. If you want to have the same light and dark strip for both of your light and dark, you can absolutely do it that way. Or if you want to mix and match and make it as random as possible and actually mix up all the squares, you can do that as well. You'll get a few different looks. If you keep them the same, it'll look a little more regular. Or if you mix and match, you're going to get a little scrappier look. Once you've cut your squares from each set of strips, that's 12 strips, and you're cutting 6 squares from each, you will end up with 72 of those pairs of squares. Now, if you're using that 3 7/8 method, you are then going to cut those into triangles, into half square triangles, and simply sew those together with a 1/4 inch seam. Now remember, since that's 3 7/8, that is the finished size. So once you iron those toward the dark side, you're going to end up with 144 finished squares that should measure, half square triangles that should measure 3 1/2 inches. If you sized up to the 4-inch size, then you are going to keep them as squares, and you're going to mark a line from corner to corner, then sew a 1/4 inch seam on each side of your mark. And then cut on that mark once you're done, iron toward the dark side, and trim those down. So those should be trimmed down to a finished 3 1/2 inch square. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about diagonal seam tape as well. This is a great tool. It would actually eliminate the need to make markings on your squares as you'd make in your half square triangles. So what you would do is you would sew with your corners matching on the 1/4 inch guide, as you can see, and just slide that right down your machine, and then switch and do the same on the other side. It's a great tool. And I love using this. It eliminates the need to mark all of those squares that you're doing. And once you're all done, you'll have 144 half square triangles. They should all measure 3 1/2 inch squares, and that's all we're doing for this month. We'll see you in December for the next step.